May 25th, 1940. A German staff map of northern France. The Allied armies are compressed into a shrinking pocket of the northern coast. British, French, Belgian, three armies together with their backs to the sea. German lines drawn around them like a closing fist. Panzer columns to the south and southwest. The sea behind them. 15 miles separates the German armor from the coast. That evening, an American journalist named William Shirer is broadcasting from Berlin. German military circles here tonight put it flatly, he reports. They said the fate of the great Allied army bottled up in Flanders is sealed. At almost the same moment, Lord Gort is writing to Anthony Eden. I must not conceal from you, he writes, that a great part of the BEF and its equipment will inevitably be lost in the best of circumstances. Everyone with a map and a military education agrees. The army is finished. 338,000 soldiers crossed the English Channel to safety in the 9 days that followed. The question is not how Britain saved them. The question is why Germany failed to stop them. The answer begins not on the beaches, but with a decision made in a German command post the day before the evacuation was even authorized. A decision the men on those beaches never knew had been made. A decision that handed Britain back the army that would eventually destroy the Reich. Throughout the 1930s, France built a chain of fortifications along the Franco-German border, the Maginot Line. The logic was sound, as far as it went. Fix the eastern frontier, force any German offensive northward through Belgium, meet it there with the best French divisions. No repeat of 1914. The plan rests on a single assumption, that Germany will repeat 1914. Germany has no intention of repeating 1914. In the early hours of May 10th, German forces launch Fall Gelb, Case Yellow. The Belgian border erupts. Paratroopers seize Dutch bridges. The French advance their best armies northward into Belgium exactly as anticipated. Then, through the Ardennes, the dense forested hills that French command has classified as impassable for armor, come the tanks. General Erich von Manstein's plan. Sichelschnitt, the sickle cut. 6 panzer divisions drive through what should have been a wall of trees. By May 13th, they are across the Meuse. By May 20th, they are at the Channel coast near Abbeville, and the trap has closed. The British Expeditionary Force, 10 divisions under General John Gort, the French First Army, the Belgian forces, all of them cut off from the rest of France by a corridor of German armor 60 miles wide. To the south, no avenue. To the north and east, German pressure building. Behind them, the sea. On May 21st, the Allies attempt to break out. At Arras, a British armored force, 60 tanks, strikes south at the German flank. The attack fails. The tanks run out of support. The advance halts, a tactical defeat, except for one thing. Deep in Army Group A's headquarters, the attack registers differently. It is local, limited, repulsed. But the men studying maps in that room cannot be certain a larger counter-offensive isn't coming behind it. The ghost of the Marne walks those corridors. The memory of 1914, when a French counterattack stopped a German advance that had seemed unstoppable. The Arras attack accomplished nothing on the ground. In the German command mind, it planted something it would take days to uproot. By May 23rd, Alan Brooke, commanding British Second Corps, opens his diary. "Nothing but a miracle can save the BEF now," he writes, and the end cannot be very far off. There is no doubt that they are most wonderful soldiers. It is not a strategic assessment. It is a man who believes he is watching everything end. He is wrong. He just doesn't know it yet. John Gort is 53 years old. Harrow, Sandhurst, the Grenadier Guards, the path of a certain kind of English soldier. So he earned the Victoria Cross in September 1918 at the Canal du Nord. twice wounded in the same engagement, he refused evacuation and directed a tank assault from a stretcher. The citation records the capture of over 200 prisoners, 2 field gun batteries, and numerous machine guns. His men called him Tiger. His contemporaries are consistent about him. He is not a strategist, always more interested in the details of battle than in the broader picture, incapable of standing at a conference table and delivering a brilliant military appreciation. Major General Spears, who knows him well, calls him a simple, straightforward, but not very clever man. He is broad-shouldered, stubborn, loyal, and concrete. In May 1940, his orders are unambiguous. London wants a push south to link back up with the French. Paris wants the same. The map says it is possible. On the evening of May 25th, Gort sits alone for a long time. The Belgian line to his northeast is collapsing. A gap is opening that will allow German forces to roll up the entire northern flank before any evacuation can begin. His orders say south. His eyes tell him north. He walks next door to the office of his Chief of Staff, General Henry Pownall. Without discussion, he issues the order: take 2 divisions from the southern push and send them north to cover the collapsing Belgian line. It goes against his instructions from London. It goes against Paris. There is no conference, no written appreciation of alternatives. It is instinct. It happens to be right. Without that decision, the route to the coast is severed before any evacuation begins. The army Brooke has already written off never reaches the beach. Gort intends to stay with his men, to be captured if it comes to that. Churchill overrules him. The propaganda value of a captured British commander-in-chief is too great a gift to give Goebbels, and Gort accepts the order as he accepts all orders. Meanwhile, Churchill is 16 days into his premiership and fighting a second war in Westminster. Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax is pressing the War Cabinet to explore a peace approach through Mussolini, a negotiated settlement before the army is lost. Churchill is resisting. The argument is alive. Its outcome depends, in part, on what happens at the water's edge off a French beach. May 23, 1940. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt studies the situation from Army Group A's headquarters, and his panzer columns have completed one of the most rapid armored advances in military history, and they show it. Exhausted, strung out across northern France, supply lines thin. The terrain ahead, the flatlands and canals and marshes surrounding Dunkirk, is not tank country. Wet, channeled ground where armor is vulnerable and infantry holds the advantage. Von Rundstedt issues a halt order. The panzers stop. The following day, Hitler arrives at his headquarters and confirms it. The armor will hold its line, protect the flanks, rest and refit. The army will not drive the final 15 miles. Then the phone rings. It is Hermann Göring. The head of the Luftwaffe is not a subtle man, overweight, vainglorious, intensely jealous of the Wehrmacht's prestige. Acutely aware that this campaign has been won by tanks and infantry while his Air Force played a supporting role. He calls Hitler directly. He demands the Luftwaffe be given primary responsibility for destroying the trapped Allied forces. The army can be held back. The Air Force will finish it. Hitler agrees. The halt order stands. At the front, Heinz Guderian, who drove his panzers through the Ardennes and reached the Channel coast in 10 days, receives the order to stop. His memoirs record his reaction precisely. We were utterly speechless. 15 miles from Dunkirk. Stopped. The halt would not be rescinded until the evening of May 26th. 3 days. 3 days handed to the Royal Navy by a combination of von Rundstedt's caution, Hitler's deference to Göring's boast, and when the psychological shadow of a British counterattack that German commanders could not quite dismiss as finished. A theory has persisted that Hitler deliberately allowed the British to escape, extending a calculated gesture in hope of a peace settlement. In his political testament of February 1945, Hitler lamented that Churchill was quite unable to appreciate the sporting spirit in which he had refrained from annihilating the BEF. Historians are largely skeptical. Only Army Group A paused, and only in part, and only for 3 days before resuming. Army Group B and the Luftwaffe kept attacking at full strength throughout. The evidence points not to a grand strategic gesture, but to overlapping miscalculations. Göring's vanity, von Rundstedt's genuine concern about terrain, the ghost of Arras, and a collective overconfidence that made everyone certain the Allies were finished regardless. That certainty is precisely what made 3 days possible. When you are sure the enemy cannot escape, there is no need to hurry. Beneath Dover Castle, carved into the white chalk cliffs, there is a room. It had once contained an electrical generator, a dynamo, and that machine lends the operation its name. Cramped, artificially lit, running on telegraph lines and organized desperation, this is where Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay works. He is 56, recalled from retirement the previous year, meticulous and calm, willing to trust his subordinates to decide what he cannot see from Dover. The operation he has assembled runs on 3 routes across the channel, marked X, Y, and Z. So Route Z is the shortest, 39 nautical miles, but passes within range of German shore batteries at Calais. Route Y stretches 87 miles, safer from guns, more exposed to aircraft. Ships' captains are free to choose. Ramsay has built the architecture. What happens at the other end belongs to Captain William Tennant. Tennant arrives at Dunkirk and confronts a situation that does not match the plan. The harbor has been bombed. The beaches are wide and flat, but the water is too shallow for destroyers to approach. Men wade out from the shore, chest deep, shoulder deep, waiting in that position for hours. At this rate, the numbers will never come close. He looks at the East Mole, a narrow breakwater of concrete and timber, 1,400 yards long, jutting into the harbor. Never designed for troop embarkation, and barely wide enough for 3 men abreast. Large destroyers and channel steamers can come alongside it. Tennant directs soldiers onto it. Within hours, the operation changes shape entirely. Hundreds of men per hour, boarding from a jetty that was never built to carry them. Without the East Mole, the evacuation remains a slow agony. With it, the numbers become possible. The little ships are also coming. Approximately 850 civilian vessels called from the Thames and the South Coast ports. Thames pleasure cruisers still in peacetime colors. Fishing smacks smelling of salt and diesel. Cockle boats from Lee-on-Sea. They are not, as the story usually holds, the primary means of rescue. The majority of soldiers are evacuated by large naval vessels from the Mole. But the little ships are the ferries, crossing shallows where destroyers cannot go, lifting men from the water, carrying them out to the waiting ships offshore. Their crossing is real. The courage of men who took pleasure boats across the channel while Luftwaffe bombers were overhead is not diminished by accuracy. While the evacuation builds momentum, tens of thousands of soldiers are holding a shrinking perimeter against constant German pressure. Brooke commands 2nd Corps along the Ypres-Comines Canal. The fighting is close range and confused. Forested terrain, poor communications, no radios below battalion level. On May 28th, Belgium capitulates. A 26-kilometer gap tears open in the Allied line. Brooke rushes 4 divisions forward to plug it. And the fighting at Wittschete and Poperinge is brutal and unspectacular. Men holding positions they know they will not hold permanently, against forces that know it too. They hold them anyway. Near the perimeter, a company commander named Marcus Irvine Andrews climbs onto a barn roof with a Bren gun and holds 1,000 yards of line. He receives the Victoria Cross. At Calais, Brigadier Claude Nicholson's brigade fights its own separate battle. the 2nd King's Royal Rifle Corps, and the Rifle Brigade holding against overwhelming German pressure from May 22nd through May 26th. They have no prospect of evacuation. They fight anyway, buying days for the Dunkirk perimeter to solidify. Further south, around Lille, the remnants of the French First Army, approximately 40,000 men, surround themselves and hold. So 7 German divisions are tied down there for 3 crucial days. The British telling of Dunkirk rarely pauses here. It should. Those 40,000 French soldiers are part of the reason the timetable holds. Dawn on the Dunkirk beaches. Pale sand stretching flat in both directions as far as a man can see. Black smoke rising from burning oil tanks to the northwest. The channel almost unnervingly still. In the lines stretching from the dunes down into the water, men. Columns of khaki and steel helmets reaching from the shore into the grey sea, 3 and 4 abreast. Some standing chest deep, some waiting hours without moving. Dead horses on the dunes. Abandoned lorries half buried in sand. The first 24 hours of Operation Dynamo produced fewer than 8,000 evacuated men. The Admiralty had hoped for 40,000. On May 27th, the Luftwaffe appears in force. 300 bombers, 550 fighter sorties, 12 raids, 15,000 high-explosive bombs, 30,000 incendiaries. Men standing in the water watch the Stukas come in. The wail of dive sirens, detonations walking across the beach. They also watch the sky for the RAF. They do not see it. This becomes one of the bitterest grievances of the Dunkirk veterans. The belief that the Air Force abandoned them. RAF pilots are furious when they hear it. The truth is tactical. Fighter Command is not protecting the beaches. It is stopping the Luftwaffe before it reaches the beaches, intercepting German formations offshore, fighting above cloud cover, over open water, invisible to the men below. German aircraft are flying from bases farther east than British fighters operating from England. The RAF holds that geometry hard. Over 9 days, they destroy 240 German aircraft while losing 177 of their own. Every one of those engagements takes place out of sight of the men on the sand. A man standing in the water at Dunkirk, watching a Stuka drop its bomb 20 yards away, believes the RAF has left him to die. He is wrong. He carries that belief home regardless. The cost at sea is not invisible. The French destroyer, Bourrasque, loaded with rescued troops, is struck and sinks. Of approximately 1,200 soldiers and crew, nearly 600 are lost. HMS Keith is hit and mortally wounded. The Admiralty tug St. Abs comes alongside to take off 130 survivors, then is found by Luftwaffe bombers and sunk with the men she has just rescued. 100 men who had already been saved are killed a second time. By May 28th, the little ships are arriving. Margate Coxswain. Edward Parker describes the approach. Margate was a pretty dead town then, he says. But when we got to Dunkirk, it was a bit different. With shells bursting and fires raging, it was like hell. Dutch coasters, 39 vessels that escaped the German occupation of the Netherlands, riding flat enough to approach the beach directly, take off nearly 23,000 men between them. The numbers climb. 47,000 on May 29th. The operation finding its rhythm, the mole working, the ships coming and going through the dark. On May 31st, 68,000 men are evacuated in a single day. Sergeant Jack Lowry watches the fleet from the beach that evening. He writes afterward that he felt as if England herself had come for us. Not just the Navy, but our people. He is exhausted, half-starved, hollow from days of expecting to die. The ships keep coming. Gort is evacuated that day, having resisted every order to leave until the order becomes non-negotiable. He goes ashore in England with the look of a man who was prepared to stay. Major General Harold Alexander takes command of what remains. By the night of June 2nd, The weight of German air attacks forces the operation entirely to darkness. The last British rearguard, 4,000 men, leaves in the early hours of June 3rd. French units cover their departure. Over the nights of June 2nd, 3rd and 4th, an additional 75,000 French soldiers come across. Just before midnight on June 2nd, a signal reaches Ramsay's room beneath the cliffs of Dover. 3 words: BEF evacuated. Then, on June 4th, the perimeter falls, and approximately 40,000 French soldiers, men of the 2nd Light Mechanized and the 68th Infantry Divisions, men who held the final lines while the evacuation extended its reach by 2 more days, surrender. They had stayed to cover an evacuation they were told they would be part of. Most of them were not. The rescue of 338,000 men was purchased in part with their capture. The accounting is severe. 68,000 men of the BEF unable to escape. 11,000 killed, the rest beginning forced marches into Germany lasting up to 20 days. For every 7 soldiers who crossed the Channel, 1 did not. Left on the beaches and roads of France, 64,000 vehicles, 440 tanks, 2,500 guns, 236 vessels lost. The BEF comes home stripped of almost everything except the men themselves. On June 5th, and Hitler addresses the German people. Dunkirk has fallen. 40,000 French and English troops are all that remains of the formerly great armies. Immeasurable quantities of material have been captured. Every claim is technically accurate. He is measuring the wrong things. Churchill tells the House of Commons honestly that it is not a victory. Wars are not won by evacuations, he says. He is right. A defeat has been made bearable. Nothing more. But bearable is not nothing. Among the men who crossed the Channel is Alan Brooke, the man who wrote in his diary that nothing could save them. He becomes chief of the Imperial General Staff in December 1941 and serves as Churchill's most indispensable military advisor for the rest of the war, the strategist behind every major Allied campaign that follows. And among them are Harold Alexander and Bernard Montgomery, both at Dunkirk, who command the armies that drive Rommel from North Africa, who carry the Allied cause from the desert through Italy and across the Channel. The soldiers wading to fishing boats in the dark at Dunkirk are the soldiers who come ashore at Normandy 4 years later. The core of the force that crosses into occupied Europe, the men Germany let walk away. Bertram Ramsay survives to plan the naval component of D-Day, the largest seaborne invasion in history, built on principles he first tested in the room beneath Dover Castle. He is killed in a plane crash on January 2nd, 1945. 4 months from the victory. He does not live to see it. Lord Gort receives the governorships of Gibraltar, Malta, and Palestine. He dies in March 1946, just short of his 60th birthday, though his only son had taken his own life 5 years before. He is not given a major command again after Dunkirk. The decision that made the evacuation possible is absorbed into the general narrative of British resolve, or attributed to others, or simply forgotten. He is precisely the kind of man history tends to misplace. Gerd von Rundstedt lives long enough to answer historians' questions about May 1940. Asked about the Halt Order, the decision he issued, the decision Hitler confirmed, the 3 days handed to the Royal Navy. He calls what followed one of the great turning points of the war. He says it as a lament. He is describing the moment his army gave back what it had spent 3 weeks taking. The beach at Dunkirk is empty now, the smoke long gone, the Channel calm. Their 338,000 men passed through that water. They went home, then they came back. The evacuation was the reason there was still a war left to win.